morning. You are back live at the round table with Mamleo. I am your host, Larry Nelson, in studio with my brother. The co-host, Dr. Bradley, is in the house. Pastor Hobbs is over there engineering. Man, where'd those 2 hours go?
Well, they went by very, very quickly, man. I mean, I'm looking at my watch. You know what I'm saying? It's already 9:01.
In the 9 o'clock hour, I tell you, so we're going to continue.
But I also noticed that the temperature hasn't gone up.
No, and it's not going to either, unless you turn the heat up in your car.
Still at 4 degrees.
It is.
It's colder than it was when I got here.
Like I said, so much for the global warming is not happening today.
No, it's not.
It's an Arctic blast out there.
You got that right. Global cooling.
Exactly. 617-282-0685 is the number. 617-282-0685 is the number. Calling number. We want to thank our sponsor, Guaranteed Rate Mortgage Company. For all your mortgage needs, give them a call. Guaranteed Mortgage Rate. Guaranteed to exceed your expectations. We're going to continue to talk about politics, but I also want to touch a little bit on this article in this week's edition of the Bay State Banner written by Yahweh Miller. It says a federal court cast doubt on Boston Police Department's gang database. Appeals court rules immigration judge erred in believing BPD gang label. Justice of the U.S. First Circuit Court of Appeals on Monday ruled in favor of Salvadorian immigrants' petition to review a deportation order, finding in favor of his argument that the Boston Police Department's gang database determination falsely identified him as a member of the MS-13 gang. With 2 of the 7 justices dissenting, the court found that an immigration judge who denied Christian Josh Diaz Ortiz's petition ruled on the BPD's controversial database in his judgment. Flaws in that database, including its reliance on an erratic point system built on unsubstantiated inferences, compel us to conclude that the credibility, judgment, and in turn the rejection of Diaz Ortiz's request for relief is not supported by substantial evidence, justices ruled. The ruling calls into question the validity of the gang database, said City Councilor Ricardo Arroyo. Essentially, what this ruling says is that people on the gang database can't reliably be said to be in a gang, he said. The justices have effectively called into question everybody who's in the database. We have to address that. The cleanest way to do that would be to get rid of it. Arroyo, other counselors, and criminal justice activists have long called for the abolishment of the database, which lists as many as 160 active gangs in Boston. We need to end the gang database, said Armani White of Roxbury, activist who works with the group Right to the City Vote. We need to think about how we provide resources and fund initiatives that prevent crime, not keeping databases that are about monitoring black people. Diaz Ortiz, who says he fled El Salvador in 2015 after being targeted by the MS-13 members there, has maintained he is not a member of the gang and was targeted by the gang members because he is an evangelical Christian. Here we go again. He was arrested in 2018 with 2 others by agents of the Department of Homeland Security's investigation and agents of enforcement and removal operations who were targeting MS-13 members. Diaz Ortiz was then detained by Immigration Customs Enforcement. He filed for asylum in the U.S. and withholding of his order for removal, basing his request on persecution for his evangelical Christian religion. He filed an affidavit stating that MS-13 members in El Salvador had threatened his life, attacked him with a baseball bat, and pressured him to join the gang. So again, folks, the federal courts cast doubt on the BPD gang database. I know that's been a conversation for quite some time. I know, Dr. Bradley, you were a deputy superintendent. I know you weren't in charge of the gang unit, but I know it's been a conversation that we've had here and other folks have had is at how people get put into the gang database at the Boston Police Department.
Yeah, it was also a conversation, although you're right, I was not in charge of the gang unit, although I did
the Brick Regional Television with us.
I did sat on the command staff for 5 years, and I do recall conversations about what are the criterions, what are the rules or mechanisms in place to determine or ascertain if a person is a gang member. What are we using to make that determination? The appearance of an individual, or there's some behavior characteristics that we're using to identify, and you can say, that this individual gang, are there some type of markings or some type of moniker? What do we have other than the appearance to put that name into the database? And so I didn't see it. as a former commander. I didn't see anything, and I felt very uncomfortable with it because I felt like, well, what is stopping you from putting me in a database of a gang
Right.
of black men, or the Asian guy in the database of a gang of Asian men?
Well-
So what is the mechanism in place to ascertain if what you're doing is true or not? That's where I'm going.
Right.
And I never saw an answer.
So
that
to your
question.
point, Dr. Bradley, there are people who are in the gang database who don't even know they're in there.
Yeah.
I could be having a conversation with you, and folks are saying, "Well, you've been labeled as a gang member." Because I'm talking to you, or we know each other, we live in the same neighborhood. Now,
I'm a
my
gang
information is obtained.
And it's just, and it is an innocuous,
Guilt
innocent
by
conversation,
association?
but you're guilty by association.
Wow.
Just because I'm having a conversation with Larry and Larry's in the gang doesn't mean that I'm also in the gang. Larry could be a friend of mine from high school, a friend of mine from grade school. I haven't seen him in 10, 15 years. Now all of a sudden I talk to him, you observe that, you pull, and now I'm a part of the gang.
Right.
And that was the question that we had
Right.
at the table, which
Right.
is why I always say that when you must have a command staff that looks like the community,
Damn.
because these type of questions will come up.
Right.
What are you doing, and,
Right.
and what is the protocol?
Right, and I was actually on a call when City Councilor Julia Mahir was asked that very question. Dr. Bradley, is who is in charge of the Boston Regional Intelligence Center, which the BRIC is where the stuff is ciphered through, and of people of color. And I think the highest ranking person they think said was a sergeant, but the people at the top, the executive director, the superintendent, the deputies, they were all white males that were in charge
Which is typical
of this
I mean,
process.
That's typical Boston. And so when you put this together, when you put together a database, the system will ask you, what is variables should I be using to determine that you're eligible to go into this database?
Yeah.
No one can show us that.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? So it's really this officer's opinion through observations in this area, or the famous terminology that they use is in a high crime area.
Right.
This is what I observed. So therefore, this individual, you can't have that.
Right.
If you have a police department that's going to be so-called reformed, and working fairly, I'm not saying that you should not keep a database of known criminals. We have those.
But the key is known, right?
Known.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not what I look like. It's my behavior that warranted me to be in that database.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I have been adjudicated through the system, and I have been identified as
Right.
this particular member
Right.
of a gang.
And then to that point, some people live in neighborhoods where there might be gang activity. I could be talking to someone every day. Doesn't mean I'm a participant in their behavior.
It doesn't mean
or
that,
their activities.
Or I can be. Look at it. It could be family members.
Right.
My brother. If my brother's involved in the gang, and I'm not going to stop being. He's not going to stop being my brother.
That's a good point.
You know what I mean? Because
Right.
he's involved in the
Or
gang.
even friends. I mean,
Yeah,
you have
exactly.
difference of opinion, but you still converse
But
with
I
each
can
other.
tell you from having conversations I was on the command staff, of who created the rules.
But to that point, you were
Eventually.
never brought into that conversation, right?
No.
In the process, right?
No.
Do you know of any other
No.
command staff members of color who,
no.
and to this date, there are none who are assigned to that? Let's grab this call. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the round table with Ma'am Leo.
Hey, good morning. This is Jamal calling. How y'all doing?
Good morning.
Hi, Jamal. How you doing?
How you doing?
You finally got up, brother. I'm waiting for your
He
call.
was
man.
freezing. He wanted to get up, turn the heat on.
I've been listening since the beginning. I just be listening.
Okay.
But this here with the gang database, it actually gave me a great idea.
Okay.
And I am in support of a BPD gang database, but I'm gonna flip it.
I knew he was.
You know they say that sometimes the cops is the biggest gang in the city, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
So we need a BPD gang database. I'm going to create a database of all the officers on the BPD who have been involved in criminal activity, right?
Uh-huh.
Because y'all remember, of course, and of course it was black and Latino officers who got caught. But remember when the U-Haul full of drugs was going to get escorted up here from Florida, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those cops got busted.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got cops like that. You got the cops from, the case with Sean Ellis and Trial 4. You got all this. So, I mean, there's a long history, of course,
Mm-hmm.
of wrongdoing and whatnot. And to Dr. Bradley's point.
But Jamal, let me just interrupt you for 1 second, and I apologize.
Yeah.
I'll let you finish it. But let's go back, right? You think that Whitey Bulger would have been able to operate in the way that he did without police help?
I'm just saying.
Go ahead. I just,
No, that's what I mean. And he had BPD and
and
state,
right.
and at that time too,
And
some
FBI.
have gone defunct now. I remember the Metro Police too.
Yes.
The MDCs and all that.
Yeah.
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 And
So
FBI.
yeah, and FBI, right? He was working with a multitude of all that. But yeah, so to my point, and to Dr. Bradley's point, to be fair, I can't do it with that officer over there. I think he's doing something. I can't do that. It would have to be based on the ones who have already got busted, right? So, for instance, right now, even this person, the officer who's under scrutiny for being involved in the January 6th insurrection, right? So even that, it hasn't been adjudicated yet. So he's just a future gang member that we're watching. You know what I mean? Until it gets adjudicated.
But see, to that point, Jamal, if I had just been in the city of D.C. on vacation, nowhere near there, and had gotten my picture, I would already have lost my job. We have members now who have been sitting on the sideline for over 2 years on allegations, no proof.
Oh, absolutely. And and for less things said, whether it's social media or whether it's utterance in the street or whatever. And many people across the city, city employees have felt that. But my point to be is that while the police, those police who don't have, our best interests at heart, have a list of us, the people, the community, we should have a list of those officers that are problematic.
Well,
and so that's what I'm strive to work on.
But see, Jamal, this goes to what we were talking about last week. And see, Ed Davis, who Mayor Wu has put on her search team, right, for the new police commissioner, was a big part of the implementation of this gang database.
Yeah, he was.
So how do you have someone that's
the BPD gang?
What's that?
He was the leader of the BPD gang.
Right, but now he is in charge of the search team to replace someone like himself in his input. This is what just boggles my mind here. So how can I take this selection serious when you have someone like that as part of the process who was part of this whole system?
Well, I do have some better insight about that, and I can't reveal my source, but talking to somebody very connected to it, they assured me, first of all, that they understood, some of the pushback for Ed Davis. They were unaware of a lot of the complicated history beforehand. So, but they understand the frustration. But I was assured that it doesn't matter because it's not like they are making the selection. So they're going to be part of the process, kind of trying to shepherd and herald the process. But really, it's going to be an open community process. And then ultimately, too, as we all know, the one who makes a decision will be the mayor herself.
Right, but the optics of that, I know there's a couple of hearings coming up. I believe there's one on the 20th, and there's another one soon after that. That the public, are these going to be in person, do you know, Jamal, or are these going to be Zoom?
Oh, no, I would figure it would have to be virtual the way because the city itself is on lockdown until the 25th or something like that. So it's like no employees going to be in the building.
Right, but don't they see him being on there as a distraction? Because if I were there in the audience asking the question, it wouldn't be about the next. It would be about why someone of his ilk is part of the selection committee.
Well, I mean, I think as it was when my experience with public forums like this, being on the police reform task force, is that that's probably going to come up because there's going to be somebody out there, me or you or some young activist or whoever out there who's going to raise that question. It's inevitable. So if they're not prepared for it, then they're really not doing their homework. It's certainly going to come up.
Yeah.
But once again, what I've been assured is that these people are only supposed to be kind of ushering the process. They're not really I don't know how to explain it. I'm explaining it wrong, but it's not like they are actually picking who and who, and these are our choices. That's not what it is. And not for nothing, when this public meeting comes up, I think a fair question would be to ask, what is it that they've in fact been charged with? Because I know, for once again, on the task force, people thought that our quote unquote job to do was different than what it was. So, once it was explained, it got more clear for folks. Like, hey, I don't have a magic wand. I can't say this is what's happening and this is what it is. We are basically a research team trying to find best practices and then make all recommendations based off of our experience and what we've learned and who we've talked to, and that's it. So I think that this committee is going to be kind of like that. They'll have their input into how the process should go, but they don't have any kind of say-so, as I understand.
Okay, so let me ask this question. Do they have, or will they have, serve as an advisor to the mayor on that selection?
Because I would assume, just to add it before you answer, is that these candidates will now be coming in, and then they'll be part of the vetting to then narrow that search down to give the mayor a list of candidates, right? So Davis will have some part in that selection.
And he will have, I'm sorry, go on.
So let me not speak out of school.
Okay.
I don't understand it that way.
No, that's usually how this process works. So unless they're deviating from it, I'm not sure what then what would the public forums be to bring information back? But then there's the selection process, and normally what happens is your selection committee. I'm going to say this and then I'll let you. The selection committee then looks at all the applicants come in. They go through that. They do that vetting, and then they give the mayor 5 or 6 names to then decide from the ones that they feel are the best out of the 50 candidates that had applied. Yeah,
once again, so like I said, I can't even reveal my source publicly.
No, not looking for that.
No. Right. So all I'm saying is that what I would suggest is that you get with Mayor Wu, her administration. I know that Brianna Milnor, who's been, I think, on the show before, or at least on one of the shows. And then I would ask the administration directly for some clarity around that, or put it in writing, because I obviously can't be in the position of answering for them doing.
No, I get that.
But the way that it was explained to me is, at the end of the day, once again, we know the final decision comes down to the mayor, and that what they were supposed to be doing, from my limited understanding, is kind of guiding the process, but not necessarily having input into the choice.
Okay, but Jamal, not to put your source in any kind of jeopardy at all, but this is how it usually works. Usually what happens is that you have this committee, the so-called search committee, who kind of weed through and kind of sort through the various applicants. And they will actually submit the legitimate, if you will, of those individuals who applied. Usually, there's a discussion at the table about who will who will get into the next level.
But its very name, search committee, means you're looking for someone.
And then the mayor will, they serve as an advisory committee to the mayor about the best candidate. That's where my concern is, because I'm not, I can tell you just from working for Ed Davis, he's not, in my opinion, a very fair administrator. He chopped off the heads of black people, so I can't see black officers and officers of color supporting this guy.
Right, but not just supporting him. It would be hard for me, knowing he was part of the process. Whoever came out of it would be suspect. There'd be an asterisk beside them.
Yes. It's
not fair to the guy. In that regard, I believe all of them would have been wrong. So for me, I wouldn't have wanted to see, if it was Willie Gross, I wouldn't be happy with that.
Correct. I agree.
Either of the Evans brothers, I wouldn't be happy with that. If it was even the second tier, if you went to Linsky or Dunford, I wouldn't be happy with that.
No, but I mean, you could have grabbed somebody, and I'm not, Kathy O'Toole, who was a former police commissioner, who at least had a reputation, whether true or not. And I'm not saying that she should have been the one. I'm just saying is that you could have found someone, maybe had a little country, but not as bad as this. This was like in your face, in your face.
Not for nothing, I wouldn't even have went with a former commissioner, because I think, just for me, it's difficult for somebody to me who's been in that job to now say, hey, we want you to help us pick somebody you know, who's basically your replacement, even though it's multiple years removed. Yeah, I don't know. And then two, once again, the idea would be, I would think that he probably thinks he did a great job.
Yeah.
So if the question was asked, hey, were you a great commissioner? He'd be like, yeah, I was a great commissioner.
Okay.
Which could immediately disqualify him from having any input.
But that's so. Jamal, I want to switch back a little bit. So what if you had your preference on this whole thing with this gang database, knowing what's been revealed and what the courts have said, what do you think should be done with it?
Well, I know at one point, I had an inquiry along with the ACLU when I first announced as part of the new Black Panther Party, and I believe that myself and my members were targeted and listed as a gang. I do know for sure, because they never admitted it, and even after the ACLU inquiry, they didn't admit it, but you know how that works, because all they have to say is, it's still under current investigation, so we don't have to release any information, blah, blah, blah. But I certainly know that I was blocked from, not just me, materials that I was sending out were blocked from the local jail and from the DOC in general, and anybody who was caught in possession of anything from me or materials could get a disciplinary charge. So I do know that there was some inside stuff. I'm more worried about it from the political sense than I am about gangs. But in this case with this young man who says he was, wrongfully identified as an MS-13 member, and then this prevented him, from, whatever it was, those cases have to be examined on a case-by-case basis. It's difficult for me to even accept the concept of a gang database or the need for it in a place like Boston, as opposed to, like, let's say LA, Chicago, where there's heavy, identification of like tattoos, graffiti on walls, marking territory, and Boston, even the usage of the term gangs, like you can't walk on any block and say, "Take me to your leader." It's very different here. So, I agree with Dr. Bradley's assessment in terms of, look, if you have records of active criminals or people who have conducted, criminal activity, that's one thing. If you're just going around and saying, look at that guy at the bus stop, he has shifty eyes. I think he's part of the shifty eye gang. You can't, you can't, there was a major movie about that where they created technology where they could pre-predict the crimes. So they knew you were going to rob a bank on Friday, so they roll up on you on Wednesday. You can't do that. So
let's grab some of these comments here. Pastor Hobbs has some, and we'll get to respond.
Actually, it's a caller who didn't want to identify themselves but wanted me to ask a question for them. I hope I'm capturing it correctly. But it was, what do you think about Sheriff Tompkins being the commissioner?
Sheriff Tompkins is the Boston Police Commissioner?
I don't know him.
That was the question. I believe that
I don't know.
caller wanted to ask what you guys
that would be a huge negative for me. That would be a no for me.
Yeah, I don't know him. I don't know much about him. So,
well, he has an opponent. So
I mean, not for nothing. He's the sheriff right now, and a lot of people know Sheriff Tompkins. Good guy and all that. But, not for nothing, he came to the sheriff thing. He came to the sheriff thing working for Andrea Cabral under the guise of, like, media or whatnot. Like, so, so him coming into that position, he had the benefit of having worked in that environment for several years and kind of, working with her and da-da-da-da. But the question at the time was even if he had a track record in law enforcement that would even say that he was sufficient to be the sheriff. Being the Boston Police Commissioner, I think, is very different, and I don't think that his skill set would match what I would view as qualifications for a police commissioner. I mean, he has no traditional law enforcement experience.
Gotcha. So there's some other comments. Says, name Ed Davis to the committee causes it to lose all credibility for this call, and then they said he's a fat racist pig.
Tell me how you really feel.
So those are not mine. This is, folks are sending in their comments, and
I think that's a little harsh. It's not really fat. I think he's
you're
big
saying it's harsh towards pigs?
No, because he's not fat. He's big bone.
Thick bone.
Thick bone. Yeah. So there's also Michelle. She's coming up on her 100 days, and I can tell you, I've talked to a lot of people that are losing patience already. They're seeing that clearly. They feel like her administration is kind of starting off as a junior varsity, in that they've got a lot of new people who don't really understand how government works, and that these are part of the mistakes that you make when you don't reach out to people who have more experience in these fields. Because clearly this could have been avoided, especially there at Davis. It could have been avoided. I mean, a Google search, even if you didn't reach out to anyone at Manlio or anyone else, a Google search would have revealed all of these. And I mean, if you're going to put someone on your search committee for such an important position, you need to Google search every one of them.
I think he's the only commissioner that both Manlio and the union voted
no confidence
in.
How about
the
that?
Only one.
Probably the first time in the history.
The first time in the history of the department.
Right. And that's the person you pick to find the next, to be part of the selection committee for the next commissioner. I think that says a lot. And they lost me there as well. Because like I said, I have little credibility in the search team now. And I know there's some very credible people that are still on there. Judge Hines is someone I have a lot of respect for. Bishop Dickerson, I don't know the other folks. I have nothing pro or con to say about them. But as soon as I saw Ed Davis' name as part of the selection committee, I was like, okay. All right. Well, what are we looking for here? More people to be adding to this database that the courts have said doesn't serve the purpose that they claim it does.
I tell you, just to comment on Wu's administration, what I'm beginning to see is something resembling Menino's.
Well, a lot of the people
I've seen a lot of the players that was in that
Davis was a Menino selection.
Yeah. So that should make people of color very uncomfortable.
But also, it doesn't represent the progression that was the election was about. We're seeing a lot of even she kept a lot of Marty's people in her administration. She just reappointed, I think, 5 or 6 people who were part of Marty Welsh's administration. So I mean, there's new talent out there. I'm just saying.
Yeah, tap into it.
Yeah. So Jamal, your thoughts on this database, on where it should go from here, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think whatever the legal challenges are, if they've been basically what amounts to like surveilling on citizens, like some Big Brother, Nazi type of thing, then that's problematic. So whatever it's done, if it's done in efforts to reduce crime and keep records on those who have in fact committed crimes, okay, that's within the bounds.
Right, but I think Jamal also speaks to what we've been talking about, Dr. Bradley, is that the leadership, the folks who are making the final decisions at the top, there's no one of color.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So now, if it just comes down to subjective, and it's like, okay, this kid over here, Hector Gonzalez, Latin King, Tyrone Johnson, he's a Crip, or whatever. If it's just some sort of arbitrary assigning of people based on their race, ethnicity, based on their geography, whatever, street or block they live on, or clothes. I mean, remember when back in the days, some of the early quote-unquote gangs around my way on Humboldt, you remember it was the Homestead Hoyas?
Mm-hmm. The Evans Street gang, Capon Street?
Capon.
Yeah, Capon Street.
Yeah. But
I don't remember them, but I know the Homestead Hoyas was, before it became the Humboldt Raiders, right? Mm-hmm. But now you got kids across the city who are getting snatched up for just having a Georgetown Hoyas hat on their head.
Mm-hmm.
But this is also happening at the same time that the Hoyas is the most popular team in college basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. So it's like, now how do you determine if I'm really a Hoya or if I just like the doggone team?
Or a fan.
But also, it'd be interesting to see how many people in East Boston have been labeled as MS-13 gang members.
Well, I tell you what I would do if I were in charge of that. I would actually stop all activities around entering names into that database. Then I will put down a criterion as to what are the checks that allows you to get into the database. Then I will run people against that criteria. Anyone that doesn't fit will be kicked out of the database.
Right.
You can't arbitrarily throw names into a database because of what people look like. It's just that's just typical Boston.
And already too, we know that there's been breakdowns of the racial, makeup of this thing, and I forget what it was, but it's like 2%, 1%, white people or whatever. Now here we are in a town that is of legend when it comes to white gangster activity, right? All the movies that they make, they love it. The bank robberies, the mafia stuff, the all of the drugs, the everything. Okay, but now you're telling me that in this gang book, all you have is blacks, Latinos, and some Asians. There's no Irish gang. There's no Irish gang, and there's no Italian gang. None of that. There's no little young Johnny the Squid. There's no little the Shamrocks. None of that. It's just all the black, Latino, and the Asian gangs. And so that, and of course, when white men are the ones who are drawing up these rules. Funny thing, there's a new superhero thing out called The Peacemaker.
Right.
But
see, Jamal, this is where, we were talking about why we think this selection for the next police commissioner is so important, because this individual, whoever it is going to have to tackle these issues, right, that have been in there for a long time. And this is someone who, Ed Davis, going back to him for a second, was part of the institution of putting this stuff into practice. Was part of the and even challenged under the ACLU under his administration, and nothing's changed. So what I'm saying is that you're now taking advice from someone who's part of the problem.
Well, once again, once again, you got to get somebody on here who can really explain it from the administration's position. I don't know that they are really taking advice, or if these are the... Okay, so let's look at it like this. Remember when the city of Boston did the dialogues on race? Okay. They might not know where the dialogues on race are going to go, because it depends on who's going to come, who's going to say what, or whatever. But what they did is they chose the moderators, the people who were going to run the discussion. So that's what this selection committee, the way that I understand it, is more about they're leading the discussion. They're not making the selection the way that I understand it. But I could be completely wrong.
But even if that's the case, Jamal, then you have the optics again with all of this that we know. This should not be someone even being part of that. That's just my opinion, and it's the opinion of
all of it's going to come out.
Right.
It's all going to come out, and not for nothing too. And where does he even live? Does he still live? I think he only lives in Hyde Park.
He doesn't live there anymore. Right. He's from what I understand, he's moved back out. No, I mean, he's making a ton of money, so I'm sure he's not living in Boston any longer. If he
making a ton of money, and outside of Boston, ain't spending none, because he's not here with our $1 million houses.
Right.
Yeah, but he's selecting our police
right.
involved in
I mean, it's someone who's not even from Boston. Think about it. He came from Lowell. You couldn't find someone
who came from Lowell with a bag of baggage.
Right. So he has no history, but I mean, people would say that, well, the mayor's not from here as well. She's from Chicago,
Well,
so.
let me just say this one thing for Ed Davis, because I do believe that it would be a whole different conversation about Ed Davis. Ed Davis's professional policing career was saved by them what you call them, the Sarniev brothers.
Yep, the marathon. Yep, the
marathon.
Brothers. Yeah.
Because if the marathon had not happened, then his record would have been like a regular record that people would have looked at and would have been highly critiqued.
But
because that major national tragedy happened, global tragedy,
elevated his status. Absolutely.
And he's forever seen as a hero.
Right.
Even though too, not for nothing, it's the rank and file guys. What was he out there, or did he dive on what he thought was an explosive device? What I mean?
No, he didn't.
None of that. But you just get the credit because you were the captain of the ship at that time.
Yeah.
So it really is truly hero worship, and Boston is good at this anyway. Go Sox, go Pat. We can do no wrong. We're the number one leaders in everything. You can't tell us anything. And he kind of rode that wave to now make him the gazillionaire police consultant, security consultant that he is. His profile has been elevated to worldwide level.
Yeah, right. So Jamal, I want to shift for a second to what we were talking about earlier, because we were talking about the concerning in Dr. Bradley's home state of Georgia, what they're doing to folks down there. It's just a mirror of what they're doing in other states. It's the weekend of Martin Luther King's birthday. My opinion, I think Dr. Bradley's in agreement, Pastor Hobbs as well, is that we're not doing enough for folks here to help to make sure, because I think folks think what happens in Georgia doesn't affect us here in Massachusetts, and it couldn't be so further from the truth. What should we be doing to make sure that our voice is counted, that our vote is counted as well?
So number one, everybody loves Dr. King, right? But ain't nobody listening. Do people know that, like, the King family put out a thing and said we don't want any King celebrations until we get this voting thing situated? So that's what they've said. Now, meanwhile, there's celebrations going on across the country because, of course, you know, look, I rented this hall, I done sold these tickets, and I need this money.
Right. You're profiting from it.
Exactly. Okay? And if not profiting directly, then they're getting the profits of the proximity. Oh, I knew Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King when we was in high school. I'm the first one to show them how to tie a tie, or whatever it is. Okay, so everybody's either trying to have a proximity to the legacy, or profit off of the legacy, but nobody is really doing the hard work of trying to continue the legacy.
Yeah.
And to me, it's actually sick. But here in Boston, what we could be doing at the bare minimum is turning all of our little black bourgeoisie attention and funds and all this, and instead of doing all the Martin Luther King Day celebrations and all this do what the King family asked. And focus all attention on all things voting. And so, if anything, we should be fundraising for these voter efforts around the country and whatnot. And as you know, when they're talking about closing polling places and all this, they come up with this algorithm to say, what are the least trafficked places and whatnot. This is another danger of us here in Roxbury, let's say. Every year in Boston, certain polling places have abysmal turnouts, right? So now when it comes up here, they're going to be like, yo, we about to close this polling place. And then now your new polling place is going to be, 4 or 5 blocks up that way or 7 blocks down that way. And now the people, because that polling place was never really active like that, they closed that polling place down. They could justify it. And now people who didn't vote before are expected to go further to vote.
I'm sorry, Jamal, but that is funny. No, that is funny. I mean in a good way. You think about it, right?
Same argument, inconvenience.
But he said, like you said, the ones that didn't vote are now going to walk even further to vote. Right?
And this is scientific disenfranchisement. And then two, let's not even talk about those of us who make the current, the conscious choice, like, man, I'm not voting, I don't care, or whatever. Let's talk about the people who want to vote like you're a senior. But now they don't move the polling place 7 blocks down the road.
Right.
Who's going to take you there? Your good for nothing nephew? It's going to be voting Tuesday. He's going to show up Wednesday like, what's up, Grandma?
Jamal, you're funny guy. Let's bring this other caller in, man. You got me sitting here, man. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the round.
Good morning.
Jamal's on the roll there.
Good morning, Jamal.
Come on.
Good morning.
Yeah, he's definitely on the roll. I'll give him that. Yeah, no, actually, I'm calling it when with the whole conversation and discussion about this BPD gang database there.
Yep.
I'm calling an A. As a cop who's probably in the gang database, the BPD charged me with associating with criminals for having sent letters to incarcerated cops asking information about the cop who raped me. It's like, I kid you not. It's like, and same cop that Jamal mentioned earlier with the quote-unquote U-Haul. Heck, it's like, I'm listening to all of this, and it's like, even having read the court decision, it's like, Larry, it's like, they might have put you on the gang database just for the radio show, considering how they determine association. It's like, really?
Listen, I wouldn't be surprised how many bases I'm in, but I'm okay because you know what, I'm not committing any crimes and I sleep well. So and
well, it was just another way for it. It looks like for another thing that BPD set up to find a way to put people down or to keep people down. It's like they create this and then make it so circular and then make it so that they can create their own legitimacy about it. And so years down the line, it gets challenged.
Right. We talked about that, and Dr. Bradley, is that the untruthfulness policy that was under Ed Davis. He was the one that installed that, and then he used it as a hatchet to say that black officers, if you deviated from in one word, not even untruthfulness, just maybe you said something different that was in your report, you now terminated for untruthfulness, and yet others oh, okay, it was inaccurate reporting, you made a mistake, all is forgiven. This is what I'm saying, is that this is very dangerous, a very dangerous
Oh yeah.
person.
Well, remember, we still have. Isn't there still a? You know who this is? Isn't there still a command staff member who was not too long ago found to have lied during federal court testimony or something along those lines? And somewhere like around, what was it? Not even within the past like decade or so. But somehow never got fired, and there was like about a dozen of them had some sort of connection to that, and then
there's been
most of them kept their jobs, and some of them promoted, and some of them even made it to command staff.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Bradley was a victim of the double standard. On some people are allowed to speak, and then others, if you look like Dr. Bradley, are not. I mean, it's just a continuation.
Or if you're protected.
Yes. Yes. So again, I think that what the courts have really dealt a big blow to any evidence in there that may be used, because a lot of times when people are applying for search warrants and stuff, a lot of times information is extracted from whether somebody's affiliated with something as support. I think this hurts going forward if you're using that as a means for probable cause.
Yeah, I mean, once you deemed as being someone untruthful, you're untruthful.
Right, but also that the credibility of how someone is entered into a database. Now the courts have said resoundingly that there's something wrong with your extraction information.
On the database. Absolutely. But again, I go back to what is the criterion, and that goes back to when I was on the command staff. What is the set of rules and guidelines that are in place to determine who should or should not be entered into the database? Or are you just arbitrarily entering people because of what they look like, or where they happen to, who they're associated with, or where you happen to encounter them? That is not the criteria.
I remember when it first came out. I'm sorry. When it first came out.
Just wanted to add because it's like, as ridiculous as it is, it's like even with BPD. It's like the way they charged me with associating with criminals for having sent letters to incarcerated cops asking information about the cop week. Yet they're going to stretch it to that for sending letters.
Yeah.
It's like, really?
I know. Jamal, what were you going to say?
When this first came out and we was combating this whole gang database thing, ACLU and all this, I found it very funny, and it was akin to the Bible scripture where it said, wherever three or more are gathered, there I am in the midst of thee.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. This thing was very much like that, because it said in a thing, if you saw three individuals on the corner, right, who look you and Dr. Bradley are dressed similarly right now.
Yeah.
Right? That was a criteria by which they could look at similar dress. Now, how many people in Boston wore black Red Sox hats?
Well, I mean, think about it. How many police officers have that shield, that bullseye, right? Does that mean they're gang affiliated?
Well, also for me, and for me, it stems back to the Reconstruction, where you had these laws put in place where you had two or more black men gather in the street. You had the right to arrest them and put them into a system where they can be now, farmed out to other cotton field, plantation-like industries to pick cotton for low cost. So it goes back to Reconstruction, it goes back to slave patrol, it goes back to our slavery. That's how I saw it.
Right. So, Helen, how would you assess the mayor's 100 days? The clerk's coming up into 100 days in her time as the mayor.
It's definitely not looking good, considering just even the chief that she's hired having issues with making racist comments and, calling cops pigs, and yet we're supposed to entrust these people for transparency, communications, diversity, and equity. Ed Davis being on the sole law enforcement person on the search committee for police commissioners, just not boding well, and all the other hires that seem to come from Menino era.
Right. So Jamal, I saw it's someone sent me a picture. They've shut down the encampment down at Mass and Cass, and someone sent me a picture yesterday that folks were right back down there. I mean, it's like folks are creatures of habit as well. This is a big thing that I know the city and the mayor's been trying to get under control. It doesn't seem to be working.
Well, I'm gonna go a little bit more easy on it, because once again, this whole first 100 days, we've given a lot of people a lot of god doggone breaks.
Mm-hmm.
And, all I'm going to say is I'm going to give a little break. There is a little bit of a learning curve and, different circumstances coming in early and all this. Everything is not, if a person does 100 things, if I can get to 80% agreement, then I might be okay. And as long as the other 20 is not egregious. But what I can say is that while people have been hemming and hawing on that Mass and Cass for a grip, she at least got something done pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And something is done. Now, you cannot stop the people from coming back out there.
Right. And I agree with that. That's why I say, Jamal said that I don't blame her that they're back. I'm just saying is that this is a problem with people are creatures of habit, is that the irony is that even though the tents aren't there, they're still back because that's where they know to congregate. And that's the difficult task of moving them from that location. Yeah.
I mean, and not for nothing.
There's so many studies out there that have shown what actually helps to resolve homelessness. It's providing an alternative, some form of alternative shelter. It doesn't have to be much.
No,
like where they have someplace that's stable, that's steady, that's like provides them with an address or something.
But they've done that up at the state grounds, right? If I'm not mistaken, Jamal, they put I saw the little houses that they have up there.
The Shattuck Hospital area.
Yeah, but they're so used to being in that space down there. That's where they all.
And some people don't want it. Like I literally, Larry, me and you have worked together on feeding people and whatnot.
Yeah.
And when this thing first started off, before it was so really, really bad, I'm talking about years ago, I used to go down there and I used to pass out hot meals, rice and beans and chicken, big plates, in the styrofoam plates.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I've had people smack it out my hand. I don't want it.
Mm.
I've had people smack it out my hand.
Yeah.
So, it's a situation where some of these people, and it might be due to obviously mental illness or whatever it is or whatever, but everybody, even if you said, I'm going to give you a hotel room in the Marriott, deluxe room, everything, room service, they still be like, leave me alone, get out of here, and cuss you out. So I think that right now, they've done the most that they could do with everybody that they could do. And then the ones who still want to be out there and still be getting high and, they out there. And
Pastor Dan went down there with his crew and they were preaching the gospel and singing and they stole his equipment. So.
Now, see, listen, I'm going to try not to laugh.
Oh, my God.
You didn't know that? No, I didn't know that. Yeah. Oh, yeah, they took off with his equipment.
Oh, Lord.
Okay, now, does that mean he's not going to be able to broadcast on Wednesday?
No, well, this is the station's equipment, so, yeah. This was a while ago when he went down there. And, they got
I'm going to go down there like Minyard Culpepper and pass out $10 bills.
There you go. Wow. There you go. So Jamal, it's King birthday weekend. Like I said, the family said we don't need to have these big. Is there anything that other than with the King families that we should be doing? And Helen, same question to you as well. After Jamal answers, what should we be doing? Because, like I said, my biggest concern is that we are heading in the wrong direction as far as rights for people of color. To vote, and I just don't see a sense of urgency. I think some people are waking up, but I don't see a sense of urgency of us not mobilizing, not just here but around the country, to deal with this cancer.
I'll just say this on Martin Luther King Jr. Much like Jesus, his whole image has been changed and used to suit various people's needs. As far as we know, Jesus was like a long-haired hippie who was passing out flowers, and it diminishes his entire revolutionary character and his kingly character, if you want to say that. And so we do much like the same with King. So King is now diminished to McDonald's commercials, and he's been usurped by the same corporations, Bank of America, who was complicit in slavery, some of these insurance companies who were complicit in slavery. McDonald's was killing more black people every day than anything else, probably. So these type of things, these corporate entities have taken over the vision, and he's also been boiled down to, I have a dream. But what I would encourage everybody to get into with your children and everybody else, Go read his last work, which is Chaos or Community. Where do we go from here? And if you really look at the trajectory that he was going on, which in my humble opinion is why he got killed, because he was getting ready to go next level, and he was getting out of that, turn the other cheek thing, and really getting into how to create tangible change, which is, revolution, forward progress. And that is the thing that always scares them the most. And as we know, and I end with this, the last thing of the COINTELPRO said, we must always try to stop a black messiah who can galvanize the masses.
Yes.
So people like Martin, Malcolm, they had to be stopped because people were gravitating towards that message too much.
Jamal, thank you, sir. Appreciate you. We'll be talking soon. I'm going to give you a call after the show. We can talk. All right, take care. Helen?
Yeah, I would say actually definitely when it comes to voting, it's like focusing on making sure that everyone who isn't yet registered, get them to register to vote, because and those who are registered, make sure that they make their voice heard rather than seeing how those that were abstaining from voting, you can hear them, the silent ones, should be as resounding, like we're only getting about 20% of registered Boston voters. I mean, that should tell you when that many registered voters won't vote. Like, where is that apathy coming from? Whether it be inaction or action, it's coming from somewhere.
All right. Thank you, Ellen. We got to run. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Continue to listen. We're going to be shutting down. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So, Dr. Bradley, on the few minutes we have left, how do we get corporate? I want your philosophical. How do we bring in the corporations with the money to fund these endeavors that we need to get out there? Because, like I said, we spend our money, but we don't make sure that
and that's how you bring
we
them
get
in.
a return. Right.
That's how you bring them in.
Right. Okay.
We have to become better aware of